and the rest of what. Although I feel like they could definitely have a less foreboding voice saying recording in progress.
Yeah, every time that happens on any system, it's always a bit of a shock.
Yeah. Hey everybody, Nick from Good Impacts. And as part of day 3 of our 0 to 80 and 80 campaign, we're focusing really on that environmental section of the BIA. So I've got with me Kris from Brewery Vivant, one of Michigan's fantastic B Corps that has often scored very high in that section. So I'm hoping to get some advice and some guidance, Kris. Do you want to tell folks a little bit about Brewery Vivant and just maybe some of the short history of the business?
Yep, right as my doggy comes in. So we're almost 11 years now. We opened in 2010. So we're located in Grand Rapids. We have our pub in a former funeral home chapel, and then we distribute our beer throughout the state of Michigan. And then in 2019, against our original business plan, we decided to open a second location, which is called Broadleaf Brewery and Spirits. It's over in Kentwood, so about 15 minutes away from Vivant. So different name, different feel when you're in there, different styles of beers and food, but all the same, values, because it's the same parent company. And both are considered to be certified B Corps because the umbrella company is where the handbook lies, and all of our stats incorporate both spots. So that's the gist of what we do. We just started having spirits in the last couple months, really. We haven't actually announced that yet, but but it'll be out there on Monday. And that's just a way to kind of expand our audience that we're reaching. But sustainability in general, it has been, part of the business plan from the very beginning, just through my passion and that of my husband, who's my business partner. So B Corp was something we knew about when we first opened. And I definitely used the assessment to go against, what am I doing as a company and where are we headed? And then how does that compare to, this internationally recognized system? Which was a great starting place. So we knew we were certifiable at the time, but didn't pursue it for another year or two. But then we've been certified since 2013.
I like that. I think I'm going to get some shirts made to promote certified. That just says we're certifiable.
Yeah, that's a good word to use.
With all of the other challenges of growing and scaling a small business, managing inventory, making payroll, just all the headaches that arise, why focus on aspects of sustainability?
And for us, I think it just keeps us evolving as a company. So, that's a piece of it. I definitely, every time we recertify, I learn new things about what the expectation is around sustainability. And, that hits your people and your planet for sure, but it definitely hits your profit as well. I like how, the assessment and what you need to do to respond to it, you're putting best business practices in place. So maybe they're not always, the crunchy ones, but they're definitely good business. So I like that. I definitely like report cards personally. I'm the nerdy kid. So, if we're going to talk about the things we're doing and talk about sustainability and why it matters to us, I like having a third party verify that what we're doing is actually real and that we're not just talking a good game, that we're walking the walk too. But really, our opinion is like every business should be focused on the triple bottom line. We all, especially, small locally owned ones like us, we rely on our community to survive, right? Whether that's customers coming in or the employees that we hire. So the better we treat our employees and we treat the community and, Mother Earth being a part of that community, I think just makes us a better business. And, hopefully we have more longevity, and a bigger reach because of that.
How have you seen your own business community change? Have you seen more in the last several years a pivot to the sorts of things that Brewery Vivant has been internalizing for a while now?
Oh, I think so for sure. I think within the local community, within our industry, I think there's a, a higher, like our hope is that we're raising the bar of what people expect a business to do. And I think that's starting to happen more and more. Um, Part of that I think is generational for sure. But I think there's also just more awareness of, that you can have a different expectation. Like something that always kind of got me at the beginning was how many people were just so happy that we did something, right? And like that is such a low bar. And we get congratulated, like, oh, you're focused on this stuff. That's great. But like that should be the starting point. And you should congratulate people because they go above and beyond this baseline. So I think that's starting to change. I think we, definitely we attract more customers and employees who are interested in sustainability, right? So there is somewhat of we're feeding ourselves in that regard, but I think the general public has definitely moved along. And nothing like a pandemic either, right? To kind of expose things about business that needed to be exposed and to be held accountable to.
Yeah, accountability is key for all of it. Because great intentions really break down without that accountability chunk of it. Are there any particular policies, procedures, organizational structure that Brewery Vivant has put in place that's been really helpful, particularly on the environmental side of things?
Oh, I think one of the most basic things in my mind, and easiest things, but also hardest, is just looking at your numbers, right? So when we get our utility bills every month, I have a tracker that I put them in, and that's smart business for one, because I can see if there seems to be, something that's too high. Because I'm paying attention, I can address that. We actually, a few months ago, we use a lot of CO2 as a brewery, and our CO2 purchasing was definitely higher than it should have been, which led us to realize we had a leak, right? So it's smart business to do that. And that awareness, I think, is important. And then, if you're tracking all of that on an ongoing basis, it's really, the information is very accessible to do things with it, whether it's B Corp questions or, we do our greenhouse gas emissions calculations every year. And that is, once you have the spreadsheet or the tool in order to report into, I think that's just good practice, again, to see what your impact is. So I think just having those systems in place are helpful. And then another thing that I think is great, and this would vary industry to industry, but within our Brewers Association, which is our national trade organization, they also collect that information. And if you participate in that, you get to receive back this benchmarking data where you can compare yourself to other breweries your size or other breweries in your region, or, however you can slice and dice it. So I think when you have industries that are embracing this and offering tools like that, right, there's just so many wins to paying attention to these details, and you can really make a difference on your usage and your bottom line, right, because of that.
Maybe Brewery Vivant is different. I'd imagine because of the culture you have, it is different. But I know the food industry, more broadly does some, and the service industry actually has a challenge with turnover. And so even if there are good policies, procedures, whatever, sometimes it's hard to get that to carry over to new employees. Is that something that you've ever had to wrestle with? And if so, any thoughts on how others could address that?
But it's always a training thing for sure, right? Like the restaurant industry typically has 100% turnover rate every year, which is an amazing number to think about. But when you think of overtime, right, you can have a lot of people change out, and we're like 30, 40%. So much less turnover, but still really high, right? If you're in an office and you said that number, people would think you were terrible. But I think the nature of our employee base is such that, people sometimes are in it as a career and oftentimes they're in it as a stepping stone to somewhere else. So really just that training program is the biggest thing, right? When we onboard someone, making sure they get what it is we're about as a company. And, the thing I think that is most tangible to our restaurant staff is, that we compost, we recycle, and then there's trash for the things that don't meet those. And that's pretty new to a lot of people. You would think recycling shouldn't be new, but sadly, even though our state offers these great programs and our cities have free recycling, I'm always surprised how many people don't do it. But it's a great thing to help in that onboarding, because you have to do this, right? And you have to understand where things go. And it just sets, I think, a good foundation for understanding the rest of it better. And then when, people have been around for, I don't know, a couple months, then we do a class about sustainability and what does it mean to the company and what's your role in it. And they can ask questions when they have a better idea of what their role is in general. So I think that ongoing training and conversation is really helpful. It's something I do every year that I really like, that keeps it in the front of people's minds and pulls information out of them. When we do our annual sustainability report, which we always launch on St. Patrick's Day as our version of green beer, we do, every staff person has to read it, and then they have homework, and if they don't do their homework, then they don't get some of their perks. And the homework is, it varies. Sometimes it's, hey, what are a couple ideas you have of things we could be doing to improve on whether it's our environmental or community focused things. Sometimes it's just, what was your favorite stat that you didn't know? Other times, try to think, we've done a few different ones. I like to switch it up each year, so it's not always the same, right? You only have so many ideas, but just keeping that in front of people. And then, something I really like within the B Corp process, they'll ask about, are people held accountable to these sustainability goals in your performance reviews and in, when you're hiring people as a part of the job description. And I think, those are all these little pieces that add up to making it more, deepen the roots within your company to make sure your team's on board.
So before we hit record, we were talking about the backlog of new B Corps, which is really, or companies waiting to become B Corps, which is exciting, but there are still so many more businesses still sitting on the sidelines, not really in the game yet. And they've probably talked about it, they've thought about it, but they just haven't had that catalytic moment yet that makes them log into the free assessment tool, start going down that path. Kris, what would you say, or what have you said to businesses that are thinking about getting involved in social or environmental justice issues and just haven't really made the move?
Yeah, I do think the main reasons we do it, right, is the awareness piece. And the fact that assessment is free and available to the public, I think, is an amazing service that B Lab offers the world. So anyway, I think, like, just looking at what those questions are and seeing, I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm not doing enough to think about it, right? And that first step is scary. But when you look at those questions, you realize, like, oh, my company is actually doing a lot of this already, right? Maybe we're not calling it sustainability, we're calling it something else. So I think that's a good point to make to people, for sure. And then, honestly, if you have these values and this is important things to you, like just being a part of the community of B Corps, like that's the main reason we decided to do it originally, was to have access to these thought leaders in our community that I knew shared our values, but I didn't know how to become a part of that community myself. And it was a great way to share space and conversations. You get to know each other, you know, if you choose to, and you obviously you have to opt into that. But when we have challenges we're working through, here's this list of people that I know if I call and say, hey, I'm working through this challenge, you know, can you give me your experience and what would you do? They're going to be focused on things other than just the bottom line, which, you know, if you don't have values aligned businesses, like that's a wasted conversation. So I think that access to easy access, right, to that kind of network, whether it's local or, you know, you meet bees around the country or around the world, I think that's pretty valuable too.
Well, I could keep picking your brain for hours, but I appreciate how gracious you've already been with your time, and I think that's a good place to leave it for now. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah.